sudden, we tried this practice. And what happened for me is the whole reason I'm here. What happened was all of that mind chatter that happens when I lie down, all of that discomfort, all of that self-consciousness, all of that like desire to perform and be something, for 1 minute, it was literally 1 minute, everything cracked open, and I just felt this feeling. It was like silent, and I was connected to everything, and it felt like, in that moment I had the thought, this is what it's supposed to be like. And then in that moment I had the feeling of feeling connected to everything, including my partner, who usually I wasn't that connected to because I was trying to perform. And when I felt that, I was like, this is what it's supposed to be like. And then I felt this hunger that I always had get quenched. Like I talk about the Western woman's mantra, you know, I eat too much, I work too hard, I go too fast, I love too much, and still there's this hunger that never gets met. And I felt like for the first time it got met. So for me, it's like the same as slow food or slow living in this way where there's this access point to a way of living that has deep meaning, and that when you touch that, everything changes.
And your philosophy is that people should treat sex really like meditation, yoga, mindfulness. How do people do that? You suggest a really strict practice.
Oh yeah, it's extraordinarily protocoled. I don't know how much you want me to say, but it's a 15-minute practice. So my first time, he said, you know, lie down, and I would butterfly my legs open, and he would sit, and he had one leg beneath me and one leg over me, and then you can try it at home tonight. And then he put his thumb at the base of what's called my introitus.
Well, you don't have to get
okay.
And okay, so it's a practice.
Yeah. And so in the same way, in Buddhist meditation, you focus on your breath right here, and that's all you do. You just keep coming back to the focus of the breath, and then all of a sudden these miraculous things happen. These worlds open. That same thing happens, only it happens with a partner. It's one of the only ways you can have that experience of everything opening with a partner.
And what I thought, you know, is so interesting about that you were saying as a graduate student, you would speak to women, and woman after woman would come up afterwards and say, you would say, do you have any questions? And every single woman would come forward and say, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And that there's about, last statistic, 40 million women who said that they didn't have sexual interests, sexual desires, and you say that's actually completely wrong. It's just that society and the way we live doesn't understand what couples actually need.
This exact, I worked with this couple, and this woman said, you know, I said, what do you want him to know? Like, he was out of the room. I said, what do you want him to know? And she said, he touches me like an animal. And then he came in, and she said, he's not even interested in how to do it. And so I showed him. I said, oh, you stroke like this and at this speed. And literally, he was just crying. He was like, all these years, I had no idea that's what I was supposed to be doing. And there's a way that we don't learn how to communicate what that is, and there's a way that it definitely does not make it through the porn industry, how to open our bodies. It takes us 20 minutes to open, and by that time, he's trained to be done.
So speaking of like a completely different alternative, Erin has written a book about really stepping off the other predictable path. We're all being raised to go and get a job, work 10 hours a day, get a car, get a bigger house. This is how we're raising our kids. And a lot of people are saying, this can't be what it is about. This can't be what I went to college for, what I was raised for. And you stepped off and said, I'm going to slow it down, and you found a life.
I did, yeah. And I think that's a really interesting thing to point out is we are raised to think there's this hierarchy of moving forward and it's upward trajectory, right? And there's such a difference between being left behind and simply putting others first. Big difference. And I think I just learned that for me to make those decisions that are certainly hard decisions to make, it takes courage to go another way. And I think we're also taught, you know, that there's an easy choice and a hard choice, and you'll know when you make the right one because everything falls into place. But for me, it was definitely a hard choice and a harder choice. I was leaving a life that I also loved to a life that would perhaps give me more love in return.
So why did you do that? Why did you leave a life you loved?
well, burnout, right? Why we all do it. I think we all learn best by failing, by doing things the wrong way. My husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor shortly before we were married, and so instantly, we were taught to hold life loosely, but also honor that weight. And that is such a tension. It is such a hard place to live. And so I feel like we kind of went full force. No one likes to feel tension, right? We ignore it. And so we ran full force into work and identity and bigger house, fancier car, all of that, until we eventually reached that point where we thought, is this it? And we were just curious to know if there was a better way. And there is.
What is the better way?
I'm very, I don't like to get into the mechanics of slow living because I think it does look very differently for everybody. It's.
What did it look like for you guys?
For me, it looked a lot like, we quit our 9 to 5, we went freelance, we moved to the Midwest, we stripped everything down and rebuilt. We really just removed the excess layers of the stuff and the priorities. We shifted a lot. It looked very messy at the time. We didn't have a plan at the time, but we slowly, little by little, just it almost, you talk about architects, it was almost like, tearing down a house, just a little by little shifting and moving things around and renovation of the heart and of the circumstances.
What about many people would say like, okay, I feel burnt out, but I've got a mortgage, I've got my kids' tuition, I've got all of these expenses. I can't possibly move to the Midwest, or the people in the Midwest, I can't possibly move to the South, I can't sell everything, I can't.
Exactly, and that is true. I think that's why it's really hard to, when we have this conversation, not knowing anyone's circumstances, to just say, oh yeah, move to the Midwest, everything's fine. I would say a really great way to live slower is to pay attention, get off the phone. Hate saying that, but get off the phone. Turn off the radio in the car. Slow it down. Think about the life that you're living. Think about the ways that you can bring passion into what you're already doing rather than looking for the passion to come to you. I always assumed that I was in the wrong job because I didn't feel passionate every day. I didn't feel that passion that I had at the beginning, so I thought I had to change jobs. It's up to me to bring that passion, and so I think it's those small shifts. I think it takes a lot of ownership to think, I have a lot more control than I think over my circumstances. I am not a victim of my mortgage, as much as I think that I am. So I do think that certainly if you are, we had made a lot of hard choices, and we really did tear it down very quickly, which worked for us. That does not work for everyone.
One of the things I've heard from one architect of change to every single one is that you have a lot more power over your decisions in every aspect of your life than you think you do. And that you do have to approach it like an architect, be willing to tear it down and then build it back up with a strong foundation, correct?
Yes.
So Ernest, you're listening to Slow Living, Slow Sex. Where does food come in?
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah. In any way you want. You're the man here. You're representing all the men.
That's quite a burden to shoulder. One of the wonderful things is that food is one of the universals that we all share. We can't go very long without ingesting food. And food is so much more than just nutrition. It's how we connect with each other. It's our history, who we are, where we come from. It's our culture. It's how we access other cultures. And so when it interacts with how we live, how we engage in sex, there's been some interesting Japanese movies, but we'll leave that it's a universal that we all share, and again, it means so much more that it becomes part of our life. It's going to be part of the way that we live, because it's something that we have to engage in practically daily, if we're lucky at least.
I read an interview with you where you said you would much prefer to see somebody sitting around a table eating Kentucky Fried Chicken than somebody eating farm-to-table salad working at their desk. I was surprised by that.
Absolutely. Food is a social activity. We can eat alone, we can eat on the go in the car, and it's wonderful if you're going to be eating farm-to-table food, fresh organic produce and that sort of thing. And, don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. But really, food is, we feed the mind and the body as well as the soul, and we do that in social interaction. So I'd rather see a family, taking that first step and sharing a meal again together than, just sitting at the table or at the desk crunching through a salad.
But does slow food, slow eating, does that actually, do you mean cooking food slowly, eating slowly? Like Thich Nhat Hanh talks a lot about, looking at your food, taking your time, slowing the whole thing down. I grew up, everybody's like, and jumped up at the table and ran out. You're not talking about that.
No, not so much. We want you to pay attention to your food. Pay attention to your food on the plate, where it comes from, how it got there, how it was prepared, who it was prepared by. And certainly wouldn't want you just gulping it down, because otherwise you're not going to be able to savor it. But we're not focusing so much on literally, chewing 30 times before you swallow or something.
Now, did the slow cooking movement, is that from Alice Waters? Is that started in California? Is California the home of that?
Well, Alice Waters, one of my inspirations. But I'd have to say, the slow food movement itself starts in Italy, where they take food really darn seriously there. And I think Alice Waters certainly inspired by that. And of course, she's gone on to inspire them as well. So California certainly, I think, is one of the leading places for slow food in the United States.
One of the things we talk here a lot about is food as medicine. Food that works for your brain as well as for your body. Are you a big believer in that?
Oh, absolutely. Let food be that medicine, as the Greek says. But it also can affect our mood. It can affect our health. We have so many diet-related diseases here in the United States today that getting on a healthier diet will improve all aspects of our life, whether we're trying to be the hard-going, hard charger, or whether we're trying to step back and live our entire life in a slow way.
One of the things when I was doing the story for the Today Show that Nicole's group is looking at, and others, is sex as medicine. So Ernest is talking about food as medicine, how it affects our mood, how it affects our brain, how it affects our children's ability to learn and retain information. You're looking at how sex can be used to get off of SSRIs, how to diminish anxiety. Tell about where that philosophy is coming from and what you're hoping to realize.
Well, fundamentally what we found was in myriad ways, all the way from the neuroscience, which shows that, well, we're doing the neuroscience right now, the first research since Masters and Johnson of this nature. What we're finding is that you can hit a state of consciousness that's actually a healing state. So we see it in, if anybody's familiar with flow research, so the alpha theta state is what can switch on. So we're finding potentially, we'll see, that you can achieve in 20 minutes what you achieve in 20 years of mindfulness meditation, because you bootstrap into the biology. There's 2 times when this type of consciousness wakes up. One is in life or death situations, and the other is in sexually charged arenas. So you're beginning to work with, this brain of ours, not to mention, as women specifically, we have tons of cortisol in our bodies just flowing through. Cortisol's the thing that has you have that dire feeling that something's going to happen. And when you actually tap into your parasympathetic nervous system, what happens is you release oxytocin, and that's the antidote to cortisol. So what you're progressively doing on a daily basis is lowering that cortisol, raising your oxytocin, changing your state, and then you're beginning to live in an entirely different way. You're beginning to think differently.
You were saying that this has basis in history.
Yeah, so there's I don't know if anybody saw the movie Hysteria, but this whole idea that they used to prescribe, that this idea was that women were hysterical, we were crazy. And so what they would do they prescribed stroking, and then that wasn't effective enough because they wanted it to go really fast, and that's how the vibrator was invented. So they had the right idea, but they didn't have the specificity that's required to actually activate the state of mind. They were beginning to get results, and then we're actually moving further with all of the neuroscience.
And so talk a little bit, Erin, about your own changing of your life. So there's the book, The Joy of Tidying Up, was kind of a phenomenon a couple years ago that people would go into their homes and try to tidy them up and look at everything in their house as something that brought them joy, and then that they could basically strip that down and change their life. Why should anybody here slow their life down, strip it down, and will they actually find more joy?
To answer your second question, I think it's I will say from personal experience, one thing that I did wrong was in my whole journey is I forgot to enjoy the journey. I truly did. I thought, okay, well, fast living isn't working for me. I'm gonna what I do is fast, right? So I'm gonna go really fast and start living slow, and then everything's gonna be fine. And I focused on the mechanics, right? I thought slow living meant that you read the Magic of Tidying Up and you got rid of all your clothes and had like 3 chambray shirts and loafers and you were done. And I did follow a lot of the removal protocol in terms of, stripping the excess. But I was still me, I was still me on the other side. I still had my issues and my doubts and my fears and my anxieties. And so what I learned and what I think the important thing is allowing the grace to enjoy just this day, enjoy where you're at today. Think, okay, I don't make my coffee with a Chemex yet. I don't, wake up slowly. I maybe have small children and slow living is nearly impossible. But
Is it if you have small children, if you're having 2 jobs, if you're trying to meet the mortgage, is slow living a conversation that is for somebody else? Or
no, it never is impossible. It never is. I think you find, what does slow living look like for you? You redefine it for you. And maybe that means you are carving out space. I will tell you, my life does not look slow. I wake up at 2 a.m. But I love that 2 a.m. And that means I go to bed at 7 p.m. So it's not like I'm a martyr.
Why do you get up at 2 a.m.?
The quiet. I love the quiet. And I have children.
It's quiet at 5.
I like the quiet and I like the peace and the dark, and 5 a.m., when the baby's awake at 5 a.m., that doesn't really work either. So 2 a.m. from 2 to 4 is when I get that window of quiet. And for me, that sacrifice means I'm going to bed at 7 p.m. and I'm missing the Netflix and the dinner parties and the, other things. So if Netflix is part of you, if that's your me time and that's where you find joy and that's where you recharge, maybe that's slow for you. Maybe it's taking that those pockets of day where you're present and you're enjoying and you're not multitasking and you're not doing a million other things. Maybe that's the living.
I think one of the things that's kind of interesting, I was doing an interview this morning with a researcher, a doctor who's here. We were talking about the super-ager brain, right? And we were talking about that we're now living in a society that's 24/7, where people are on hyper alert, right? And what that does to the brain, but also what it does, because we're constantly feel we're being judged. And that starts with very young kids at school. They're being bullied, they're being judged on their appearance and their life, and it's stopping them from taking risks, from innovating, not just in how they live their lives, but in ideas, which her argument was that also will affect our productivity as a nation. But how difficult I think it is for people to live an alternative lifestyle, one that young people that their parents don't understand or that your friends don't understand. If I had said to my mother, I'm gonna live a slow life and I'm gonna enjoy some slow food, and by the way, I'm gonna practice some she wouldn't have tried to ask to see me a doctor. She would think I'd lost my mind. So there's a lot of judgment in society, at a young age, and these kids who are 20-something, probably, and everybody in this room, judgment of our peers. Yes. So how do you have the courage to say, by the way, I'm going to have an orgasmic meditation practice. I'm going to eat slow, and, I'm going to sell everything, and I'm okay.
That's such a great point, because I do feel like we live in a very critical age, and we also kind of live in this age where we've become billboards for movements. You don't have to be a billboard. I feel like we didn't approach this and say, hey everybody, we're living slow, see you later. It was just this, we're making this choice. There doesn't have to be a reason that is palatable to everyone. I had a home birth, which was in my area not the norm, and there was some judgment. But if it's a better choice for you and your family, yes, there's tension in that, but you don't have to announce it to the world. It's okay to just be curious about living another way. It's okay, like, just to explore and fail. Maybe.
But is it? I mean, like we were saying this morning, is it? We're not a society or a community or a culture that really loves people who fail. Mm-hmm. We don't go like, good for you, like, wow, and we're not parents that are like, you go, you just failed.
Yeah, we don't know how to embrace failure. We forget the learning part, we forget that learning and trying is failing. And we like learning and we like trying, but then when you fail, it's like, you'll be fine, eventually. But it's the learning, and that's the beauty. And I also think that for me, we encountered a lot of, when we were saying no to a lot of things, we encountered a lot of that. Maybe you guys are just selfish, like why not be more giving and abundant, and why less is more. But I think for me, no but is the best solution. It's not that I'm saying no, period. It's I'm saying no, I can't do this project for you right now in a work-related scenario, but I know someone who can, and I have the perfect person for you, and I would love to put you in touch. So I think you can approach slow living in a way that is more palatable for people, so that it's not like you're living in the Midwest off the grid and with goats and sheep and saying no to everybody you know.
Why do you think, Nicole, what you're advocating is good for society?
I think there's multiple reasons. I think the first is, I think we're moved by inspiration or by desperation. It's going to be one of those two. It's either going to be the burnout or that you see some greater potential. And I think there is a way, like for me what happened was I touched, like, I don't think until you have the realization at a physical level that we're connected, that you can begin to make change in the world. I think otherwise it's theoretical. Like, I was a Buddhist and I wanted to go out and do all this good for people, but I was doing good for them. It wasn't like we were connected and we were a world community of people who wanted to change and grow together. So I think that's the first reason. But I also think, most of us are so body undernourished. Like we're craving an intimacy. We're craving just actually being reached and being touched and having that slowness of connection. And I think that has us act in ways that are consumptive. Like we go shopping. Women get oxytocin from shopping, and so that's why I think you see us shopping all the time, because we're actually looking for that oxytocin hit. We go shopping. We try to overachieve. There's all these things that we are trying to do to get this feeling of fundamental rightness in our bodies. And that I found, you actually can get through practice.
And why, Ernest, do what you're advocating, slow cooking, slow eating, slow food, why is that good? Why is that needed in our society?
How long do you have? There's many different reasons. Our current industrialized, fast food, monoculture crop society is unsustainable in the long term. It's destroying not only our bodies with many debilitating diseases, but also destroying our environment. And unless we make changes, it's just not going to be able to keep going the way it is. Beyond that, once again, I turn to the fact that this is who we are and where we come from. And if we forget that, we've lost what makes us who we are.
So if somebody says, okay, after hearing Ernest, I want to adopt slow food, slow eating, what is the first 3 things they should do?
Well, first thing I think is pay attention to what you eat. What you're actually eating, where it came from, how it was prepared, who it was prepared by. Number 2, start cooking. And this is really a challenge. I think the biggest lifestyle change for a lot of people is to start cooking again. Number 1, you may not have the knowledge to cook, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be that difficult. But more importantly, most of us don't have the time to cook. And so putting aside some time to do that. And then third, share your meals. Not everybody just sitting on the TV trays, watching the television, eating at your desk, but engage in eating as a social activity, and not just when you eat out in restaurants, but at home.
So you basically have to do what Aaron did. You have to slow your life down so you can actually make time to cook?
Absolutely, you're going to have to make some decisions. And again, this is one of the biggest challenges. We don't have enough time to cook. Used to be that usually the woman would cook and she was a stay-at-home mom or something like that. And our society just doesn't support that anymore. It doesn't support making sure that the other members of the family can get back in time so they can eat, that they can share a meal together, so they can help in the preparation or the cleanup. As a society, we're failing big time.
One of the things Nicole was saying, and Aaron, before we came out here, was that you're being called a lot to work with marriages. Christian churches and other communities, because so many marriages are dissolving because of our inability to converse about our sex life. And I said, I was raised where you never spoke about sex or money.
Yeah.
That was like taboo. These are often taboo subjects, right? And so what are you finding in the state of marriage in 2017, and how do you think you can help?
It seems to me that there's this fundamental element of intimacy that's missing. Like, as a woman, often I work with so many women, and often what I hear is as I'm performing and I'm enduring, and it's inconceivable that this experience could be something that actually has you feel like. For me, when I was first practicing, I hit my body just felt nourished, right? And that brought me closer to my partner in this way, like, oh, you're bringing me this fundamental feeling of feeling good. And then often what I'm seeing in marriages is the women can't talk to the men about what they need for their bodies, and so they're enduring, and then when they can't endure anymore, then something fundamental breaks, and then he goes off and he does what he does, and we're all compensating in these various ways. We aren't pair bonding, we aren't bonding with each other. Often the man is bonding with porn and women are bonding with food. And there's a way that we're like trying to get these needs met out here rather than with each other.
So how do we begin that conversation as a society? It's not something that people raise their children talking about. It's not something that many people are comfortable talking to their partners about. How do you initiate these conversations?
That's been my question for 13 years, and I think what we begin to do is, that's why we're doing the science, is beginning to put it in the context of health and wellness. Like, oh, in the same way we came to understand that, oh, if you do yoga, you're healthier. If you meditate, you're healthier. A fundamental feeling of rightness and goodness begins to happen in your life. And when we can begin to do that with our sexuality and not just dismiss it as something that's an obstacle to achievement, but as something that's necessary for the whole of your life, then we can begin to have the conversation. So I think we just begin to put it in the context of, this is something that's vital. It's vital for your existence. It's vital for every single thing that you want to do, from achievement to intimacy in your marriage.
That kind of thinking that that's going to stay over here in the closet, so to speak, is naive or contributing to the demise of whatever you want.
Right. Look at the divorce rate. Look at hypoactive sexuality desire disorder, where we have this pink pill. Look at the blue.
Hyperactive.
This is the new women's disease. It's called hypoactive sexuality desire disorder, and it's so we have.
What is that?
Yeah, right. It means you don't want to have sex because the sex isn't very enjoyable, but there's now a pill for it. It's like the woman's
Viagra.
And so that's what
we
we're doing.
didn't have that. There's a woman's Viagra?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk later. So, Erin, how do you begin? So how do people she's saying people need to begin that conversation, I suppose, in terms of how we raise our children, to where we find ourselves if we've just had a child, or we're dealing with an empty nest, or we're dealing with other health challenges. That's a conversation. How do people begin to have the conversation with a spouse or kids with their parents? I want a different life. How do you start that conversation?
Well, I mean, I think too, it's really important to live that to know that if you're in a household with other people, there's some give and take, right? I personally relate very much to the minimalist lifestyle. I don't like a lot of things, but I have a pack rat husband and a toddler, so there's a fair amount of excess in our home. And so I think you look at, well, what's your biggest trigger right now? What is the thing that you most resent about the life that you would prefer to love? Maybe it's the having the kitchen counter cluttered is just your thing. Like that drives you insane. That is my thing. That drives me crazy. So if I can just focus on that one thing and just get that thing done and get the people in my house on board with that one thing, that brings me a lot of joy. There are a lot of small things. I would agree with Ernest that paying attention is part of the problem. There are a lot of small things in our life that we're just looking over day after day. And if we could tackle that one trigger, it makes a big difference.
You just said the life you love.
Yeah.
And I was speaking also this morning, I was watching the news last night and they were talking about the opiate addiction in our country and why is everybody so addicted to drugs. And we were talking this morning about what's underneath of that. What's actually underneath of that people hate their lives, right? It's that they're trying to learn how to soothe their lives, love their lives. There's something is underneath of this massive drug addiction that we have going on in our country, is that people are fundamentally hate their lives. Is that what you're finding?
You mentioned hunger earlier, right? That's, yeah, I mean, go ahead.
And have you seen the rat park research? Where has anybody seen this? Where they took a rat and they, right?
Go ahead, tell it.
So they took a rat and had water that had an opiate in it, and it drank until it died. And then they took the rat and they put it in Rat Park, and they had other rats and the opportunity for connection. And they had the same water there, and the rats drank it in a way that was enjoyable. Like social, they drank opiates socially. And so what they're finding, the fundamental finding that they're finding in addiction is that the thing that's missing is human connection.
And what we were talking about that earlier today on this other story, that the most important thing that your brain and your body needs is connection. But if you have the wrong connection, it's the most destructive thing to your mind, to your body, and to your life. So I'm going to open this up for questions to any of these three architects of change. And what I like about this is that each of you are thinking about how to move culture, society, conversations forward in very different areas, but how connected they all are, because you can't eat in a vacuum, have sex in a vacuum, live in a vacuum. The only thing we're missing up here is money, which is another big component. And you were saying there's a slow money movement now, so I'm like, okay. But are there any questions? Do people have questions for Aaron, Ernest, Nicole here? Great, okay.
Well, it may be more to you, but I was wondering, is there any correlation between the research on women having Alzheimer's and their sex practices? Or I'm just feeling instinctually, intuitively, that there's a connection between lack of their sexual pleasure and connection and
Alzheimer's. I don't know anybody's looked at that part.
Yeah.
We're part of what the Women's Alzheimer's Movement is doing, as Sandy said, is trying to look at why 2/3 of all the brains being diagnosed belong to women. And so they're looking at women's hormones, the way women, their chromosomes, the way women process inflammation, the way women loop depressed, the isolation that many women feel. So there's a whole range of things for the first time that we're trying to look at the way certain women or women age. But I don't think that there's been any one specific thing about sex, but
because it's so marginalized, sex.
Yes.
I mean, I saw your interview on the Today Show with, and the discomfort we all have. I mean, I was raised that way, very conservatively.
Right.
And if anyone had told me I would be practicing Om, I would have said, you were hot.
Right, so this is a big, part of actually, which is why at one point we were even thinking, should we do this conversation? And when I did the story for the Today Show and I was talking to the people who run it here, they were saying when they go to dinner, they say what they do, and of course, that's all anybody wants to talk about. But, so there is a hunger for these conversations that are viewed as provocative or slightly taboo, and that's what I think you're trying to break down.
Exactly.
Because you're saying it's not that there are 40 million women who don't have an interest in sex. They just don't know how to connect, or the men don't know how to connect to them, or that there's this big, massive miscommunication going on.
That's it. I was thinking in the room, you know, as we get faster, as the country gets faster, our business gets busier. Because there's that hunger is just becoming so apparent.
And I was talking to Nicole about being the mother of young women who are saying, you know, that we're living in a society of swipes, you know, that they're numbers, so that nobody's interested in connection. They're just, you know, guys are interested in numbers and swipes, and that's how it goes. And you have women who are looking for something completely different.
And here's the thing this is the thing I want to say is, you know, what I used to consider a 10, like I thought it was like, amazing, that's like a 1 to me now. In terms of like where you can actually go, in terms of, I love that you used the term inhabiting. In terms of inhabiting your body, like I've been doing this practice for 22 years and it's just beginning to open again and again and again. It's endless what's possible. And we're just taught about 13 seconds.
Question? Okay, in the back.
My question was for you. Did you find it, how did it feel when you weren't allowed to say orgasmic meditation? Like, did you find that interesting? I just find that sex is so important. That's why we're all here. It had to happen.
Well, I was just saying, I wasn't raised where that was something that you spoke about, right? I don't think my parents, my mother ever spoke to me about a sex life. So some people say it's generational, I don't know. But I talk to a lot of people who, you know, it's still an uncomfortable subject, not just for my generation, I think. It's just kind of, you know.
Everyone still laughs. You know, there's still,
And so you must deal with this all the time, right?
all the time. They laugh and then they corner me. And then I just have this one thing.
Like we said, the predominant thing that people want to come over and talk to you about is what's wrong with me.
Yeah, it starts with what's wrong with me. Or maybe 25% are, I had this experience. I don't know what it was, but something opened. Those are the two things, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's a part of bringing this all out, whether it's, as I said, and I didn't have the conversation about having an alternative lifestyle, and my kids talk to me about, I don't want to do what you did, I don't want to work like you did, I don't want to have the life you had. And there's a side of me that's like, and then I'm like, okay. Okay, tell me, describe for me the life that you envision. That's not going to work. But we're not, you know, I think it's a challenge, right, for us to go, okay, that's slow, or let's take our time and eat slowly here. So I think everybody has to adjust a bit in every way. Go ahead.
There's to me, there's a big difference between what you do externally outside your skin, because it's objective and you can name it and you can swipe it, and then there's a sense of what happens when it's in your skin, and if you're going to see what's in somebody else's skin, you need to talk to them, and there needs to be some detail and some resonance, and that's what I find interesting in orgasmic meditation or in eating at a table. There's an opportunity to be in resonance, or to sort of deal with little changes that happen, improvisation. So I'm just putting out there as a shape for this conversation, if anyone wants to comment on that.
So I think that the question is also really kind of how to bring the conversation more to what's going on internally with people, and we also, where's the space to have that conversation in a society that doesn't really reward that doesn't really make room for that you don't see the cover of Success magazine with this conversation, or Time magazine, or we see, you know, so-and-so's a billionaire by their 30 and everybody wants to make an app and get on that runway, right? So I guess you're saying, how do you make room for that conversation that people are hungering to have, but don't seem to.
But they're in a hurry to get something else done.
I think probably part of our discomfort with it is it's immeasurable, right? who can measure the state of the heart or the state of how rich your connections are. And we live in such a metric-based society. So for me, it was releasing those metrics entirely and saying, you know, this reframing productivity. Who says that this conversation isn't more productive than me sitting in the office? You know, who says?
Yeah.
And I think a really great question that we need to ask ourselves is, you know, it's not about what is slow living or what is slow sex or what is slow food. It's what is it for? And I think the answer is connection and community, and I think it's exactly what you're saying.
Go ahead.
I practice orgasmic meditation, and I was just thinking while you're up there, there's a connection between all these. And I know with the meditation practice, it affects the way I eat. It affects the way whether or not I care if the table is clean. And so I was just wondering if you could speak about, like, if Nicole, you could speak about how practicing in connection affects other parts of your life, and if either of you would do that as well.
For me, you know, I'm a woman, so food is an issue. And sometimes it's a pleasurable issue, and sometimes it's an issue. And I remember when I first started practicing for the first time in my life, I actually got what sugar did. So I wasn't eating theoretically, I wasn't eating according to what a book told me to do. I actually could feel my body in such a way that my body was so lit up, and then I ate sugar, and I noticed I went up, and I crashed. And it for me, it isn't until I feel it that I begin to change. I can change for a period of time when it's idea-based, but when I actually feel it in my body, and that's what any good practice does, is it teaches you how to feel and how to experience your life and how to train your attention to the way that you know what's going on inside. And when that happens, all of these are clearly, as well as slow money, all of these are clearly connected. It just becomes really clear how you want to live.
So in the spirit of applied learning, you had me at my legs were butterflies. What do I do tonight with my husband? What comes next?
Hey, No, but I think she asked a really good point. So when I was originally doing this story, I said, oh, this isn't for married couples, or you have to be a couple, or what? And so I was told, oh no, you could just go in, because I was saying, like, oh well, you have to have a partner, and they're like, no, you don't. And I'm like, okay, that's really accurate. So what does she do? Does she have to? She has to come and.
Here, I can make it really easy and low charge, meaning electricity here. So you can go to, this isn't an ad, but you can go to onetaste.us, and there's a free video there that will show you the practice, and then you can try it at home, and then you can progress from there. But it seems super basic, but the protocols are really important and put in place for a reason, primarily because as a woman, you need a certain kind of safety to let go, and so the protocols are put in place so you can let go.
And don't you think that maybe if you go home and explain this, you're going to get, like, you're like, what?
I think Ryan will like it.
She thinks her husband will like it.
My experience, it's funny that you say that. That's my experience, is that women are always like, oh no, he'll never want to do it. I don't think you want to. Mine, not my husband. And then I'll meet the husband. I'll say, well, do you want to do the practice? He's like, yeah. And so it's funny what we assume about what they want. They just want to know. My experience is they just want to know what to do and how to succeed with us.
So the bottom line is that they do that, then they're going to eat better. They're going to learn to cook, and then they're going to throw all their stuff out. So we're going to wrap this up because we always try to get people back out. Erin is going to sign her book, which is just out, and so we have her book for sale here. Nicole is here. You can talk to her about how to deal with all that. She's going to talk to you if you want to learn more about slow food, slow cooking, slow eating, and paying attention to what is in your food, because it does affect your brain and your body. And if you're a parent, it does affect the moods of your children, the information your children retain or don't retain?
Don't get me started on school nutrition.
Yeah. Well, these things are all changing. I was saying to my kids the other day, the conversation that's being had today around nutrition, all of these conversations didn't exist 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So that's progress, because we are moving our minds forward, humanity forward, and the goal of this conversation today was to talk about how all of these things are connected. And the goal of these conversations always are to, ignite change, open your mind, open your heart, and then also think about you being empowered to live the life that you want to live. And as you were saying, Nicole, to me, everybody has a purpose at Daedone, as you said. And the challenge for each and every one of us is to find that purpose in our lives. And in order to find it, we have to slow down.
That's it.
That's exactly it.